Hi, everyone. How are we all doing? I am, in fact, here to talk about this fine fellow, Emperor Norton, Joshua Abraham Norton, also known as Norton I, Emperor of these United States and Protector of Mexico. I was excited to talk about Emperor Norton. When I was putting this talk together, I assumed that everybody knew the basics, and we were going to want to skip those and go really, really deep. But when I started polling my friends to establish a baseline of Emperor Norton knowledge, I had a classic problem, which is that even when they're trying to compensate for it, experts in anything wildly overestimate the average person's familiarity with their field. I am not an Emperor Norton expert, but even in my case, I had overestimated how much folks knew about Norton I. But this crowd's a little different, so let's try something. It's a poll time, so if you know something about Emperor Norton, I want you to raise a hand. If you think you know a lot, I want you to raise 2 hands. If you think you're an expert, I want you to stand up and wave those hands around. Okay. And then I'll talk to you afterwards and you can tell me what I got wrong. But for the sake of the people who did not raise any hands, let's do some basics. Let's do some basics. So we are going to give an Emperor Norton 101 in one slide. This is Emperor Norton, San Francisco public figure, local eccentric, late 1800s, starting around 1856. He looks like this, super fancy, but also a little raggedy. He proclaimed himself emperor. He gets very famous. He does a bunch of proclamations, more proclamations, and then he dies in poverty, and he's remembered to this day. That's it. That's the whole talk. Except that I have questions. Because this is about what I knew when I started down this, but I had questions. Like, what the fuck? Who was this guy, and where did he come from? How did he become emperor? Why did everybody go along with it? Did he believe his own thing? And no, really, what the fuck? So let's get into it. So who is this guy and where did he come from? I want to start at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start. Joshua Abraham Norton was born around 1818 in Deptford, now part of London. His parents were English Jews, his family were merchants and farmers, and in the 1820s the family moved to Cape Colony as part of a UK colonial scheme. There were a lot of those. Norton was about 2, so he will not have remembered England. He grew up there. There are different parts of Cape Colony in South Africa, but eventually as a young man he went into business with his brother-in-law. The business failed. That's foreshadowing. He's in his 20s, and so what do we do when we have something go wrong in our 20s? We go and we live with our parents. So he went to live with his dad and work with his dad in Cape Town. But, and this part is speculation, working for your parents sucks. So at 27, he takes a big leap, and he takes a big journey. He sails back up to Liverpool, and then to the United States, and then down to Rio de Janeiro, and he ends up in San Francisco in 1849. So 1849, kind of a big year in San Francisco. We'll come back to that. A lot of stuff going on. He's 31 by now. He has money in his pocket. How much or how it got there, a little bit in dispute. And he invests. He makes deals. We know that he has real estate interests. We know he's doing some commodities trading. That's foreshadowing. And when I say he's doing deals, his holdings included land and buildings and water plots. This was a big thing in San Francisco. So all the parts that are now the Embarcadero and Financial District were water, and you would stake out these plots and bet that somebody would fill it in and turn it into something, which they did. But really, this story takes shape when he takes a big commodities trading swing in 1852. Rice is a big deal. You're feeding a lot of hungry people in San Francisco, and it's a major source of food, but there are shortages. The rice had been coming from China, and there was a famine in China, and that rice flow slowed down, so they were getting rice from South America. He sees an opportunity, and Joshua Norton and Company sign a contract with Jose Maria Ruiz, Francisco Ruiz, and Manuel Ruiz, doing business as the Ruiz brothers, to purchase 200,000 pounds of rice. It was already in the bay. It was being stored in a ship in the harbor. There'll be a lot of those. Rice had originally come from Peru. And the reason he did this was because the price of rice had gone up 900% in the months before this. And so he got a pretty good deal on this rice, and he thought he could make a killing. He puts $2,000 down on a $25,000 deal in a contract. Yeah, that's the problem. So the next day and over the following weeks, a lot of other ships showed up with rice from Peru. That high price that he had bet his contract on crashed. He sought to void the contract on the grounds that he had been misled about the quality of the rice. The Ruiz brothers sued him for non-payment. It went to the courts. It was in litigation for 2 years. There was a lower court case. It went to the Supreme Court of California, which sounds fancy, except that that was 3 dudes and it had been founded 3 years before. We'll come back to that. But it was the Supreme Court of California, and he was forced to pay $20,000. A couple things about that. Number one, he did not have it liquid, for sure. Number two, that's like $500,000 roughly in modern purchasing terms. So when I say he made a big swing, he had made a really big swing, and he was leveraged to the hilt. This is like 2008 crash level situation here, and he didn't have it. So he was court ordered to foreclose on his various properties, and he declared bankruptcy in 1856. So at this point, he is 36. He has moved halfway across the world. He had become momentarily affluent, famous, well-known. All of this was very public. It's still, there's a lot of newspapers, there's a lot of publicity in San Francisco. Everything is playing out in the papers. And he had very, very spectacularly crashed and burned. And then he just goes dark for a few years. There's not a lot of record of what happens in the next 2 years. There's a few things. He serves in a jury trial. Somebody tried to steal a gold bar from Wells Fargo. And then in 1858, he announces his candidacy for US Congress. That doesn't come to anything. It's kind of more foreshadowing because he's getting into this groove of announcing things. Which brings us to, how did he become emperor? Well, that part's simple, and I think a lot of you already know it. You walk into the newspaper office, and you hand him a piece of paper, and you buy an ad that says, "I'm the emperor now." Which is what he did. September 1859, this statement appeared in the San Francisco Daily Bulletin under the headline, "Have we an emperor among us?" At the peremptory request and desire of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay, Cape of Good Hope, and now for the last 9 years and 10 months past of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States. Everybody should get together in the music hall, we'll all get together. And the point is to make such alterations in the existing laws of the Union as may ameliorate the evils under which the country is laboring, and thereby cause confidence to exist both at home and abroad in our stability and integrity. And then he just gets to it. He is so busy. He is seen in the streets in his unmistakable finery that comes pretty quickly. He actually gets donations pretty consistently from various veterans, local veterans. He produces a constant stream of proclamations, and he's always communicating and doing telegrams. Just a sample, there are so many of these, you can look them up. He has multiple proclamations saying, you know what would be a really good idea? A bridge across the bay. I think we should use that island in the middle, maybe dig a tunnel, and like get it over there. He proposes marriage to Queen Victoria. She does not reply. He starts a correspondence with King Kamehameha V of Hawaii. He does write back, at least once. He expands his remit to cover Mexico at some point in there. And he just keeps going. After the bigger papers start, honestly, they start making up stuff and printing their own versions, he gets tired. He actually switches to the African American paper, which is like an abolitionist African American paper locally, the Pacific Appeal, and he sticks with them for the rest of his life. 250 proclamations with that paper alone. And you have to picture, like, if you came to San Francisco in this time, he's living on this street. On the left, it's not the tallest building, it's like a couple of buildings kind of on the back. He's living in a lodging house. It's tiny. There's a reading room in the lodging house, kind of one over, and he just does all of his correspondence there. He wanders the streets, and the wild thing is, San Francisco goes along with this. He prints his own money. You can find that on eBay for a lot of money. He uses it, that's how he paid for stuff. Folks also started to use it, some of it was in circulation. He was stopped by the police at one point for erratic behavior, and a crowd of onlookers was like, no, and forced the police to give him up. And apologized to him. And they never did that again. On one occasion, there was an anti-Chinese riot, a mob, and he kind of talked the mob out of it and was able to get them to back off. I don't want to paint too rosy a picture, but he was a strangely progressive person in a lot of what he wanted to do. He certainly talked a lot about racial equality, especially after he started working with the African American paper. And he just kept going like this for 20 years. On January 20th, 1880, after 2 decades of being emperor, he collapses on a street corner and dies. The San Francisco Chronicle reports that the king is dead. 10,000 mourners visit his body in states. He's buried at the Masonic Cemetery, but then later, as many people were, transferred to Colma. You can visit his gravestone to this day, and there is an annual commemoration of folks who go on the day of his on the anniversary of his death. The site is marked by a large stone that says Norton I, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Which leads to one of my last questions. Why did everyone go along with this? How does any of this make sense? We're back to our next question. Why did the good citizens of San Francisco, the newspapers, but the general public, treat him so respectfully? And I have a very sophisticated historical theory here that I will skip through. San Francisco, boom town, went from 1,000 people to 50,000 people, completely overnight, absolute madness. You were making land out of the water, you were making fortunes out of nothing, and as a result, things were a little explosive. They were like, in the early years, the city caught fire 6 times in 18 months. There were constant violence in the streets. This is Judge Terry, at that point a Supreme Court justice, stabbing a vigilante with the Bowie knife that he always carried. This was just the stuff that happened. And so my sophisticated historical theory is that San Francisco, early San Francisco, was wild. And it just made sense. It was a boom town created out of nothing. Why not have an emperor created out of nothing? I also think he captured the anxieties of the age. The beginning of his reign coincides with the run-up to the Civil War. Everything looks like it's about to fall apart. Why not have an emperor? And he became a celebrity. It was a great age of newspapers. They wanted to have celebrities. He's pictured here with 2 other celebrities who he didn't really like, Bummer and Lazarus, the most famous dogs in the city, the rat catchers, which we should do a talk about. And so it all just kind of made sense in the context of the time, which set the tone for the San Francisco that we know today. So, as we close, important question, did he believe his own thing? And I wrestled with this, but I decided to turn things over to an expert, our good friend Samuel Clemens, who's not really a fan, actually, but said absolutely, although nobody else believed he was an emperor, he believed it. And so I'm going to go with that. I'm going to say that Emperor Norton believed himself to be an emperor and took his responsibilities as ruler very seriously. And so I would love for everybody to raise a toast to Emperor Norton I, who set a precedent that in this fine city, if you are weird enough, and if you can fully commit to the bit, you can make something of yourself here. And I'm going to cheat and give a coda. That was a stereograph of Emperor Norton on a bicycle. Clever folks might have thought, stereograph? Was that Muybridge? Yeah, it totally was. Anyway.